Welcome to Boss Talk. My name is Jim Parker. This is my business partner, Carey Sobel. We help people buy and sell businesses.
In today's episode of Boss Talk, our topic is a local broker needed? I primarily sell businesses in the Southeast and a lot in the state of Florida and some across the country. But Jim, you do a lot more transactions across the country. And I think the answer to the question simply is in the name of our business, Boss Group International.
The international part.
Yep.
And, we have not sold businesses outside the United States, but the international came from originally because we helped a lot of people overseas buy businesses in the United States so they could legally work and live here on E2 visas, L1 visas, and EB5 visas.
Which we still do today. We still do a lot of visa transactions. But if business and commerce can happen globally, why can't the sale of a business happen without any geographic restrictions?
Right. Now, if you've got a pizza shop, a local pizza shop, a neighborhood pizza shop doing $200,000-$300,000 in gross sales, yeah, you should probably find yourself a really good local business broker to help you sell that business. But I sell businesses that have gross sales between $1 million and $10 million, and that's kind of my niche. And the reason I work in that niche is because I do a lot of businesses that are targeted to specific types of buyers, buyers that are looking to buy businesses with SBA loans. And I know you sell in that same gross sales range, and you even go higher than that. So if you're selling a business for a few $100,000, a local business broker is probably sufficient, and that's probably all you need. You get into the bigger businesses, you could use a business broker outside your local area.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Carey, before we go any further, I want to say this is not an infomercial on Boss Group. We genuinely want to cover the conversation of, do you need a local business broker or do you not need a local business broker?
I think a good starting point is just talking about change. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of change, but if you can't get on board with change, you're not going to evolve. Mm-hmm. And in 2020, we had the global pandemic, and I think it introduced a new way of doing things. Now, of course, global transactions and business sales happened before that, but through COVID, we were doing deals digitally. We were having closings digitally and virtually. Mm-hmm. We started doing a lot more things in our practice digitally and virtually as a product of what we had to adapt to during COVID. So I think that being able to do deals across the country, not maybe relying on the locality, evolved even more through COVID.
Carey, I totally agree with you. That's when my mind started shifting, and I started realizing, to me, I can sell businesses anywhere in the country. I just want to find good quality businesses, work with business owners that I really enjoy working with, and not be constrained to the geographical area. And when COVID hit, most of the businesses that I was working on were in the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. Before that, everything was in the state of Florida. But going through the whole COVID situation, even though they were local businesses, a lot of times I never met with the buyer in person. I never met with the seller in person. We were doing our closings virtually. Everything kind of ran very, very, very smoothly. Yeah. At the same time, I want to let you know, if you're outside the state of Florida and you're looking to sell your business, it doesn't mean that we can't meet in person and we can't do things in person. Both Carey and myself would have no problem jumping on an airplane, flying up, having lunch with you, or if we have to have a buyer seller meeting, we can fly up. No big deal.
But the fact of the matter is the majority of the work that's getting done during the long period of time it takes to sell a business does not require in-person interaction, does not require you to be side by side. I finished a deal recently that was out of state, and I did not meet the seller until the closing. We talked on the phone. We had many conversations virtually, but I shook his hand afterwards and said, "It's nice to finally meet you in person." And it was really cool. Yeah. And he said, "You did a fantastic job staying connected." And I did not feel like this is the first time I'm meeting you. I feel like I know you.
Right. And even if you're using a local broker, it's not like you're going to be seeing them 3 or 4 times a week.
Exactly.
And really, if you are seeing the broker that many times, then chances are the buyers are not being pre-screened enough.
Right.
Because the first line of defense should be that the first call, the first interaction between a buyer and a seller should be a phone call.
Yep.
That reduces everybody's time. A seller, if every time a buyer wants to meet with the seller, the first time they have an interaction, that seller then has to stay after work hours, get there before work hours, or get there on the weekend. And that really puts the seller out, because, who wants to work an all-day shift and work all day long, and then you're meeting with a buyer at 7 o'clock at night. That's the first time you've had that's the first time you've had an interaction with that buyer. So I'm a firm believer, whether you're using a local business broker or you're using a business broker outside your area, that first interaction between the buyer and the seller should happen on a phone call anyways. Because a lot of times a buyer will get on the call and, they realize just being on the call, there's something about the business that's not a good fit for them. Or the seller's like, they get on the call and they're like, yeah, there's just something about the buyer that's just not a good fit for the business. And that way you're saving that time of doing an after hours or before hours and dragging out your day. This way, you can go into your truck or, drive down the road and, as a seller, and you can make that buyer seller phone call. And then when you have that in-person meeting, the brokers can be there or not be there.
Yep.
That first in-person meeting, if you're a seller and you want me to be there, or you want Carey to be there, yeah, we'll fly up. No big deal. It's a couple $100, fly up. We can do that meeting, and then we can fly back the same day. No big deal. But again, you shouldn't be like you're having 15 of those type of meetings, because that means that you're not pre-screening the buyers enough up front. You're not doing those buyer-seller phone calls up front. And at the end of the day, when you get together, that first buyer-seller meeting that's in person, it is more about the buyer and the seller getting to know each other.
We're just facilitators.
We're doing all that work up front, and we're doing all the work after that buyer-seller meeting. That buyer-seller meeting, the broker should not really be saying much in that buyer-seller meeting. We say this all the time.
And we cover that in another topic, buyer-seller meetings. We're there to facilitate the conversation, but it is about the buyer and the seller seeing if it's a match.
Yes.
It's like a first date.
If a broker is talking too much in that buyer-seller meeting, this face-to-face, they're interacting way too much. Should be basically introducing the two parties, saying how the meeting is going to go about. Hey, we'll start off, Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, tell the seller a little bit about yourself and your background. And then, after that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, talk a little bit about your business, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A, take a tour of the facility. Usually the tour of the facility happens, towards the front of the meeting. And then from there, it's about the buyer and the seller doing most of the interaction. And again, all of our work is happening prior to that meeting. It's happening post that meeting. That meeting is about the buyer and the seller getting together to get to know each other and for them to learn a little bit more about each other.
And when we talk about, is the local broker needed, the argument on one side may be just understanding locality. But at the end of the day, we are connected to, I think we said there's 10,000 business brokers in the country, and we belong to the IBBA, International Business Brokers Association, and we have contacts all across the country of brokers that we work with in a lot of the different metro areas where we have whatever connections that we need and resources that we need to get deals done in different areas besides where we're at.
And we have access to U.S. Census information. Obviously, we're talking to the seller. It's really coming down to who's the best business broker to sell your business.
Absolutely. I mean, opening a door, physically going to a location to open a door and let somebody in. That's when I kind of looked at residential real estate. I didn't get excited about residential real estate because I don't like saying, look at these beautiful countertops and look at this swimming pool. No, I like diving into the business, and you do the majority of that virtually. You don't do that when you're actually opening up a door to a location. So really, why do you need a local broker then?
And you know what? The local, if you're using your broker you're using, whether they're local or not, it's not like you're going to be seeing them that often. The more times that you guys are getting together is probably less productive. Everything is being done anyways.
A business owner should keep their pedal to the metal, running the business,
keeping their eye on the business.
We're doing
the broker should be back. End. You should be, on the phone, working the phones really hard, emailing, doing the paperwork, getting everything together. I mean, they're doing stuff behind the scenes,
So we were just talking a little bit about, the connections across the country and that allows us to transact more nationally, domestically. You have a peer group that you're a part of, and you meet with your peer group often, and it's brokers from across the country sharing best practices. Do most of those people in the peer group also sell businesses across the country?
Yeah. A lot of them. I would say probably more than half of them in that peer group. There's 12 of us in the peer group. Every single person in that group is top notch, A+ business broker, and we get on a phone call for an hour and a half every month, and we just pick each other's brain. The whole and we are completely open with each other. We tell each other everything that we're doing, how we work on things, how the processes go. We all sign confidentiality agreements to belong to this peer group, and this peer group's been going on for now. I think we might be going into our third year, and it's just about how sharing information with really great people and them sharing information back and you getting better at what you can do. And I'm going to say out of that 12, God, I never sat back and thought about it, but probably maybe way more than half were doing business deals.
And they all
all across the country.
They all have the capability to do it. It's just a question, are they practicing it? So, some people may want to stay within their, geographical boundaries for cost considerations or whatnot. But I don't always think, too, that the neighborhood local broker is the right broker for a business just because they're
local. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Like, what other value does that add?
Right. You're looking for the best person with the best support team behind them and their processes to do the best job in maximizing your sales price, getting the best terms that you can possibly get on your business, and finding the right buyer for that business. And the local broker may or may not be that person. And with that being said, like for me, opening up outside of the state of Florida, it gives me more opportunity to find the really, really good quality businesses to sell. Because, we don't take on subpar businesses. We take on better quality. So it opens it up for us to have better quality businesses. And for the business owner, it's doing the same thing. It's opening up so that you can find a broker that is the best to sell your business. And at the end of the day, for me, sometimes I talk to a business owner and I love the business owner. I love their personality. I think they have a fantastic business and I think it's very, very sellable. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not the best business broker for that. And I pass it on. And I'll call another broker and say, hey, I'm talking to the seller, great person. They got a great business. I think this is very sellable, but it's not for me. Would you be interested in working on this business? And sometimes the other broker's like, well, why aren't you taking it then? And, to me, it's like and you're the same way, Carey. We've created this system that works for us, and we've got all these gears working. And it's only the right businesses that work well in that process, and when there's the right business going through that process, we get exceptional results. When it's a business, even though it's a great business and it's going to be a good business to sell, it might not work for our processes and our systems. It's like throwing a wrench into the cylinders and clogging it all up, and it spits out. It's not good for us, so it's not good for the seller. So, sometimes I talk to a seller, I'm like, you got a great business, you're a great person, but I'm not the broker for you.
Yeah. Well, and if you're only focused on selling local businesses, your opportunities are going to be smaller.
Yeah, right.
So, I can say confidently, unless you own a brick and mortar business, I don't really think that there is necessarily a reason that you need to hire a local broker. The data and information that a local broker is going to have is probably accessible through databases and online for all the demographic and information studies that you have, with the exception of like knowing your neighbors and selling the business in the community. The local broker thing just really doesn't have any boundaries.
Right. And I think that's the key too. I mean, typically I would say most of the time a restaurant would be good for a local broker.
Definitely.
Unless you have a multi-chain, 10, 15, 20 stores, restaurants, that's a different situation. Maybe you want to get somebody that's not a local broker.
Yep.
But even if you're a business owner and you're doing business in the local market, it still could be a great fit for a broker outside of your local area.
And, this job for us, selfishly, is about saving time. Because there's a lot of steps. The steps to actually sell a business is longer than your kid's Christmas list. It's unbelievable. And we actually have written these lists out, and it's kind of nauseating. Like, we're at the point where we don't need to go down and check every single one of them because we've done it so much. It's like muscle memory. But the steps to sell a business is absolutely out of control. So for us, efficiency is number one. And we've done a really good job at Boss Group in making sure that our efficiencies are something we're adding to it every single month when we look at our processes. But for me, I love video calls instead of driving to go meet a person. I love that for the seller and the buyer as well. Of course, yeah, we're saving everyone time.
We're saving everybody time because the buyer's getting in the car and they might have to drive 45 minutes to that meeting, and then the meeting might last an hour and they drive 45 minutes back. Okay, it's not that much if you're buying a business for a couple $1 million, but sometimes within 10 minutes, It's not for me.
Yeah.
And the seller, again, sitting there working all day long, and then they have to sit there and do a buyer-seller meeting for the first time at 7:30 at night, and they're going to sit there for an hour, and they know within 10 minutes, or even if the buyer is not into the business, it's wasted time.
Yeah.
And they're staying after hours.
And a lot of the tools that we put together, like our business profiles and our confidential information memorandums, our SIMs, are so well put together that when you send it to somebody, they get a really good idea for what the business is like. There's not necessarily the need to be there in a buyer-seller meeting, introducing everybody for the first time. We've done a lot of that work up front, and the seller videos that we do makes you feel like you're sitting there talking to a seller, right, as a buyer. So all of these things are just creating efficiencies, knocking down the laborious, arduous process of selling a business and making it faster to where we can transact without having to go drive back and forth and meet people in person.
And you know what? The efficiencies are not just good for us, but it's the efficiencies that are good for the business owner too. Because, if we're going and we're taking a half an hour, 45-minute drive, spending an hour there, half an hour, 45-minute drive back, and it's not necessarily a good meeting. And I think those meetings are important, but there's a lot of things you need to do
prior to
get that. And you've got to, that should be like when you're at the point where you're like, it's a great buyer and we think it's a great fit for the business. We've already had communications by video call or regular phone call a couple times with the seller. They just want to see the business, and we know that once they see the business, they're probably going to put an offer in. That is when, hey, let's get together and let's actually meet. But that time is not only just saving the time for the seller and the buyer and saving time for us, but you got to look at it this way too, is the more time that your broker is spending in the car and handling that type of stuff, that's less time that broker, your broker, is spending bringing in other buyers to the table,
Yep.
So
I think when you talk about selling a business from afar, we should probably talk a little bit about the process or, technology and just how it plays into things, the use of video, Zoom, data rooms, the ability to send information in the form of video. I mean, I've done walkthroughs in locations, just with FaceTime. I mean, It's just the way that we're connected. I just don't find the need anymore to, double down on having a person that is within a mile radius of you being the person that helps you bring your business to market.
This is 2024.
Yeah.
All the technology is there that's needed. And again, we can fly up a bunch of times to make a transaction happen. At the end of the day, again, I've been selling businesses since COVID that I rarely met the seller or the buyer, just on a few occasions, and a number of transactions where I never met the seller and the buyer face to face, and everybody was thrilled and everybody was happy
because you saved them time.
Yeah, and you know what? It's 2024.
Yep.
And this is not like selling a house. I wouldn't say if you're going to go sell your house that you should get somebody out of state to sell your house, but when you're selling your business, it's a totally different story, and it's about finding the right broker, the best broker to help you sell that business.
Yeah. So as you were just saying that, I'm thinking, if a business owner, and it's probably for smaller businesses, is selling in their community to the people in their community, it's kind of a different ballgame. Whereas if you own a business that, has gross sales between $1 and $10 million like you do, they're probably selling somewhere besides the general area where that location is. And maybe it's a warehouse or a distribution center, and they don't actually serve any clients in the immediate area. They're producing a widget and they're shipping the widgets across the country to their client.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you're selling a business for a couple $100,000. You got a really, really small business. You're selling for a couple $100,000. You should probably use a local broker. But and the buyer is probably going to be somebody that's local. When you're selling a business that's going to sell for $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, even $2 million or $1 million, a lot of times, most of the time, the buyers are coming from outside that geographical area themselves.
Oh, for sure.
So.
And we have, so many private equity companies and private family offices that are wanting to acquire businesses in Florida. Everyone wants to move to Florida, right? Yeah. So, we work with a lot of out-of-state buyers, but, we also work with a lot of out-of-state sellers of people in our database in Florida that maybe want to exit the state, or just buyers and sellers across the country that have no ties at all to where we are centrally here in Orlando.
And another thing I want to point out too is, and before I point that out, the a lot of the buyers, when you get into that price range of selling a business, if they are an individual buyer, they're willing to relocate to find the right buyer. I mean, to find the right business. Yep. You're buying a business for a few $1,000,000. It's more about finding the right business that's a good fit for you, and they're looking to relocate.
Yep.
You do get the buyers that live locally too. They're buying a multi-million-dollar business, but you're opening it up. And then, as you said, private equity group, family offices, and things like that. That's all outside of that realm.
So I think also you can get a good sense of a person's personality through a video, right? Because you can still see their body language. You can still build that relationship, through a screen. Of course, sometimes it's better to have that in-person interaction, but I think you get enough through video. Something that I do think is better in person is negotiations. I do think negotiations can be done better in person. But when you get to that part where you're actually negotiating a contract, it probably makes sense to invest the time to go take the trip if you're not doing it in person.
And I think it's important that the buyer and seller do meet in person prior to the contract. I encourage that. Just have video calls and/or phone calls prior to that. But I do think that in-person meeting between the buyer and the seller prior to going under contract is imperative.
Yep. If you are considering the sale of your business, I encourage you to throw out all local aspects of consideration for your broker. It's about that broker's skill set. It's about that broker's personality. It's about how good of a job that broker can do to sell your business, not where that broker lives. That broker is not restricted to be anywhere. We're not on lockdown anymore. I encourage you to find a broker that is a good fit for you regardless of where they live.
And you know what, Carey? I just want to add one more thing too. The confidentiality is a big issue of selling a business. The fact that your broker is not in your back neighborhood selling your business, that helps protect that confidentiality as well.
Oh, no question about that. That's actually a really good point. The further away you may actually be from a location, the better. Like, I'll give you an example. I sell a lot of bars and restaurants, right? And we live in Orlando, Florida. When I walk around downtown Orlando and I'm walking into places, maybe I'm going in to have a drink, maybe I'm going in to eat. If people recognize me as a broker, they may think I'm actually going to list up, right? So, I mean, it's just an example of how the locality sometimes is actually worse.
Right.
But there's so many reasons that, we can discuss this and make the arguments, but really at the end of the day, it's about the broker. Right. It's about the quality of broker.
Thank you for joining us on Boss Talk today. Really appreciate it. If you're thinking about selling your business and you're doing gross sales of $1 million or more, please give myself a call, Jim Parker, or my business partner, Carey Sobel.
We appreciate you tuning in to this episode of Boss Talk, and we will see you for the next one.